Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, broadcasting live every Thursday evening beginning at 6 p.m. Central right here in Panama City Beach, Florida, home of the world's most beautiful beaches. I want to thank everyone for joining me on my weekly broadcast. Each week I'll feature some of the best instructors, coaches, authors, and entrepreneurs in the golf business today. Starting March 7th, I'll be adding the Coach's Corner panel to the mix, beginning the show with a great discussion, followed by an insightful interview with this evening's guest. So let's get started by introducing tonight's special guest. All right, thank you everybody once again for joining me tonight live here on Golf Talk Live. It's always a pleasure to bring this broadcast each and every week, and I appreciate all of your continued listenership, if you will, and very excited to have my special guest tonight. But just a couple of quick announcements before we get started, and then I'll introduce my guest, and we'll get into tonight's program. Just to remind you, of course, for the next couple of weeks, I'll be just doing an hour-long broadcast with my very special guests each week, and then on March the 7th, as it said in the intro, we'll be kicking into the full broadcast, which will be 2 hours. The first hour, of course, I'll be bringing back the Coach's Corner panel this season. And then on the second hour, I'll be interviewing my special guest like I am tonight. So right now it's just an hour broadcast as I sort of get warmed up for the beginning of the season. And then we'll get into the full broadcast beginning March 7th. So you want to make sure you tune back in on that week as well when we begin with some of the great panel discussions that we have each and every season. So I hope you'll tune in. And at the end of the show, of course, as I close out the program, I'll give you some other great ways that you can tune into the show, some other great social media platforms that you can keep in touch and so forth. And don't forget, I always want to hear from you. You're welcome to call in anytime during our live broadcast. The number is area code 646-716-4667, or you're certainly welcome to email me any questions or comments to me personally at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. So as I mentioned, I got a great guest tonight. Joining me is Robert Moylan. He's a licensed clinical professional counselor and author of several books, including Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. And he was on several seasons ago talking about his first book, of course, Emotional Core Therapy. And he wanted to come back on, and I'm glad to have him here. Just a little bit more about him. He graduated from Northwestern University. He has an MA plus an additional 84 hours of graduate studies. As I mentioned, he's a licensed clinical professional counselor and also a letter winner in wrestling from Northwestern in the Big Ten Conference. It was also a Chicago Park District boxing champion and a three-time finalist. In addition to playing tennis in high school, he also coached high school tennis and wrestling, and he's also a single-digit handicap golfer, so obviously a very accomplished player, and I'm sure that not only will we help with your game in the actual playing, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to keep your emotions and so forth in check tonight. So let me welcome my very special guest, Robert Moylan. Good evening.
Thanks, Ted. Nice to chat with you here. I'm glad to be on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. And as always, thank you for coming on. And it's always a very interesting discussion that we have. And I'm really looking forward to tonight. So let's talk about, you actually have a number of books out there. And I just want to read a little bit more here, and then we'll get into our discussion. As I mentioned, your first book, Emotional Core Therapy, was top-rated book on Amazon.com in 2014 in two categories, mental health and emotions. You also wrote a book for teens called Emotional Core Therapy for Adolescents, which was also ranked number 7th in the same category. And your third book, of course, was Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy, so which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And so you've obviously are dealing with an area that most golfers probably, other than the professionals, really don't focus on. Everybody's sort of out in the driving range, trying to perfect their hitting game, if you will. But there's another side of the game, and we want to talk a little bit about that tonight. So just talk about a little bit why you put together the first book, Emotional Core Therapy.
Well, I really owe my life basically to mental health counselors myself. I'm 57 years old, but I grew up in the city. My mom actually had 13 children, one before us, so a total of 14 children. And my father passed away, unfortunately, when I was 12 years old in the fire. So I grew up pretty much without a lot of resources. I basically lived in an impoverished area. We had one bathroom for all those children, if you could believe that. But
Right.
I use my brain to kind of help me get out of the neighborhood and, better myself. But sports was a great way to do it, a great tool. So I picked up boxing as a teenager. I had about 25, 30 fights in a ring, and that was during my junior high school years. And I wrestled also during the same time. And after that, ended up, being ranked number one in the state, wrestled a Big Ten. I actually took fifth in the colleges, all the colleges in Illinois. It was about a 25, 30 team tournament. So I had some success there. I really don't remember much of the successes that I had. I really don't think about it much. It's more the pain, the suffering that I endured through boxing and wrestling. I mean, I wrestled, basically national champions, All-Americans, things like that. And they really take it to you. They give you a beating like you want to remember. You remember these beatings for days, So I learned through suffering a great deal, how to get back on the horse, so to speak. And then I ended up playing tennis. I was a high school tennis player, but I played tennis competitively for a few years after college. I enjoyed it. I think for me, it's really, I have an obligation to help humanity. That's how I view it. See, I discovered the root cause of stress. I have a model that effectively treats any stress on the golf course and off the golf course. But it's much broader than, golf. Golf I might talk, use a little bit during the day here or there. For years and years, my sports psychology practice is a small component of what I really do, which is more addictions counseling, mental health counseling, families, individuals, et cetera. But what really, Ted, it's about really weakening people. People are really weakened by stress. They don't understand what's going on. And I really came up with this approach years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but I was able to, with money, put it into resources. And now I've written 7 books, mostly on the same topic of stress. What is stress? How to deal with it, whether it's sports or, addictions. I've now published in 16 journals. I cover topics like cigarette addiction, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, things like that. So basically, how it works? It works like this, Ted. It looks like entering data in the computer. Any stress you have on the golf course or off the golf course, you can input into my 8-step model and get back to a peaceful state. That's never been done before, and unfortunately, it's really even done now. People don't understand. I think that's why I'm pretty outspoken about putting this out there. Most of my stuff is all free. It's on my blog, Robert Moylan blog. Just Google that or emotionalcoretherapy.com. The Kindle version has my books for free, unlimited too. So, and even one of my books is a published manuscript in a journal. So most people can access this stuff for free. I also have an hour training video, and I've been on some other shows that are online, so people can access this. Even down in Florida where you're at, there's a large population that's suffering addiction. So I've had to been speaking and been in some journals out there, just talking about ways to combat this stress. People don't really know about stress, and it weakens them. So going back to golf, out there in Florida, you have, just like Illinois here, we have a lot of talented young players, and they may get injured. They may have financial difficulties. They may have stress at home, families, et cetera. They may even be very talented and go off to college and, feel the isolation at school and stuff and not be able to and wonder what's going on. But all stress, Ted, goes back to the 4 emotions. There's only 4 emotions that cause the body stress. So golfers are fascinated when they find out there's only 4. And when they can learn to identify and release those 4, that's the key to life.
So let's talk a little bit about those 4 emotions. Let's sort of break them down a little bit. You can explain what each of them are and maybe a little bit of how they affect us in many ways.
Sure. Because when you watch people on TV, I see Jason Day, how he stays calm before a shot. He's trying to basically, do what's probably coined mindfulness. Every professional athlete probably knows mindfulness. Most of these pros have psychologists that help them out here and there. And the things I teach, the techniques I use in my book are all commonplace psychology techniques that most people use from time to time. I've just organized them in a manner. I haven't discovered anything new. I don't put anything new out there like, say, hypnosis or Reiki or biofeedback, and I've developed my own term of stress. What I just is organize the principles into easy-to-read fashion. So what happens is this. There's 4 emotions, and they are joy, grief, fear, relief. I have acronyms for my 8 steps and for the emotions too. So the acronym is really just get for real. Just get for real. Basically, joy is just, get is grief, for is fear, and then relief is real. Relief, most people can understand relief is just going to the bathroom when you feel bloated 4 or 5 times a day. You feel that way. The idea is to embrace these 4 emotions, whatever they are. So, for example, what really happens that I see for these young people is that they for golfers, for example, they maybe hit the ball great in the bay on the driver range, right? They maybe just hit the ball like Cameron Champ, 320 yards, 330 yards, be fascinated. And then they get on the course and they have difficulty. They get away from their families, et cetera. And what's really going on is that their perceptions are one. Everybody's perception is different about what they hit for a shot. I mean, what they're seeing. Even Tiger Woods gets upset in the course. The idea is that once you have a relaxed, mindful state of being, you're learning to release these emotions each shot and resetting each shot. And so, like, let's forget about golf for a second. Let's take basketball because it's really quicker. You hit a shot and you miss it. You better run back down in defense and forget about that shot and get back to a peaceful state and learn to play defense. You know what I mean? You can't sit there and get angry about it for a long time. You see what I'm saying? You have to reset, stay calm.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe tennis is a similar thing. You miss a backhand, right? Well, you have to go back and set up for a next serve. You see, so you have to reset quicker. In golf, it's a little bit slower, but your emotions still affect you. And it's really not just on the golf. With the golf game, it could be outside of the golf course. It could be, say you're playing really well say you have a good putt, good sand shot, a good driver, but say your long irons are costing you trouble. So you might be able to shoot under par, 2 under par, except for your long irons. You don't have a good form there, so you're maybe 3 over, and you're upset about that. Well, what's the key? The key is it's emotional. Learn from that grief, embrace that, get back to the range. Stay calm. Don't get upset at yourself. When we talk about emotions, every one of my books has a chapter on anger. See, it's almost impossible to learn from anger while it's happening. Like, for example, I used to get angry in a sandbugger because I don't have a good sandbugger game. Well, guess what? I had to learn to stay calm. Underlying each time you have anger, it's really just grief. It's just sadness. So once you get in touch with that sadness, you can learn from it. You can try something different. So you can change your grip, your stance, etc. And golf is mostly a trial and error process. That's why when you look at these golf pros like Hank Haney, guys like that, they can't fix anybody's swing in one try. They take 3, 4, 5 tries. You see what I'm saying? So you have to be patient with them and work with your pros, that type of thing. So the idea, again, is like what weakens golfers is the emotions. I wouldn't say weaken it, but it can alter their central nervous system. So the emotions alter the central nervous system. That's what causes the body stress. Even too much joy could be bad for a golfer. Say you hit a great drive, you're excited. Well, if your next shot is a bunker shot that's really delicate, you have to calm your central nervous system down before your shot. I think that's why you see most professional golfers are really pretty much even keel, like a Luke Donald out there, or, even a Freddie Couples. They're known for staying calm, because if you stay calm, you don't get too up or down. You're going to do a little bit better job with your emotions. Now, that's not always the case, because you see how Tiger gets excited with his putting and things like that. Tiger's just a very talented guy, So, but the rest of us human beings, we all have stress, whether it's on the golf course or off the golf course, and the whole idea is to manage it well. And so the process is to, when you have a relaxed state of being, and mindfulness is a good example of anything, is staying calm. That's what I call my 8th step. What you do is you flush out the stress each shot and get back to a peaceful state. That's why my tools are pretty much invaluable to any athlete, especially golfers.
What's interesting that you mentioned, I just want to go back to something that you said a few moments ago about, on the range and then transitioning into the golf course. Cindy and I, my co-host on another program that I do on Tuesday mornings called The Women of Golf, talked about this. In fact, just this past week we talked about it, and that sort of transition from, practice tee out in the golf course creates a lot of anxiety for many, especially amateurs. They get those first tee jitters, the adrenaline's pumping, and they get out there and, instead of hitting those nice, beautiful drives or, pitch shots that they were once doing on the range a few minutes ago, now they're spraying it all over the fairway. So a lot of anxiety and stress, as you said, comes in. So what do you think it is? Now, obviously the pros, as you mentioned, have access to therapists and things like that they can consult with, and most of us out there don't have that, at the snap of a finger when we're playing our golf. But what do you think traditionally separates sort of professionals and how they handle their emotions on the golf course from our amateurs? What are they doing differently that we can learn from?
I think they're practicing better. I think practice makes perfect. If you look at amateurs, what they do is they don't replicate what really happens on the golf course. And I'll give you an example too. Sometimes amateurs will wear headphones on the golf course, but if you can't wear headphones on the course itself, why would you wear them on the driving range? I mean, so if you're on the driving range wearing headphones and just maybe hitting irons or drives off the grass, is that really going to replicate what really happens on the course? No. So basically, practice makes perfect, so to speak, is the analogy I would use. You want to replicate that as much as possible. What I really tell golfers is to, and I've always taught over the years is, like, say you're around the chipping green or around a bunker, to try to rotate yourself each day when you're practicing around a different part of the green, so you have different lies. So you might have an uphill lie chip one day and then a side hill lie another one. That's going to help you with what's called anxiety. What you're talking about, Ted, is anticipatory anxiety or being overwhelmed. Your sense of self is overwhelmed. Right. It's excessive fear. And we don't want that. And so I think what happens is, by the way, I've worked with golfers specifically on that thing that you're talking about. A pro golfer really is like, right. I just get overwhelmed at the first tee. And so it's sort of like the same analogy to being afraid of snakes. You know what I mean? How do you treat that? You just have to go, one step at a time and work to overcome it. But the key is to identify the fear. So if you have fear about something, you have to examine what's really going on. A lot of people practice, I would say, improperly. You have to practice different lies, not just hitting on a perfect lie of, on a driving range. So that's not going to replicate an uphill, downhill lie, thick, rough, in a real course. Do you see what I'm saying? So I would try to, right. If you're on the range, I would go to, when I practice or I teach people how to, we're working on playing, I go to a lie that's uphill and downhill lie, at the end of the driving range, there might be a little hill there. Practice those lies because you're going to need those lies on the course, you see, and that's what can cause right. people's stress right there. That's part of it. You make a good point, like even talking about this, because I see a lot of talented players. They're shooting like high school kids shooting 69, 70s. They go off to college, they're shooting 73, 74s, only second team, maybe not even making all conference. You wonder what happens. What really happens is they're not used to the emotional component. They have a good support family at home. Maybe their financial situation is good. Maybe their friends and family are nearby. They go off to college in a dorm room. They're traveling, you know what I mean? And they're getting beat for the first time, And that's a lot of what happened to me when I was an athlete when I was younger. But I see this over time with people. Everybody's different about what they happen to them as far as stress. So you have to respect the individual needs of each player. For me, I just listen to what goes on with them. I say, what's really, why are you here? What's happening? And I try to get an inventory of their stress. Generally, what we do, Ted, is we rate stress from 1 to 10. So, if you're on the course and you're, if you can stay within 1 to 3 as far as your stress level, I'm happy. It's I'm excited, but it's just a 3 or 4. I hit a great drive, best drive in, last couple of days. But I learned to let it go and not get too excited. If you're excited or ecstatic, that might go to a 5 or 7 as far as joy goes. You don't really want that because you have to calm yourself down for the next shot. Look at Rory McIlroy a few years ago at the Masters. He just got overwhelmed. It was clear his emotions got the better of him and he lost the tournament. Well, what he didn't do properly was reset. He's a very talented player. But I think what I see with youngsters is that they get overwhelmed on the course because they really don't have all the shots that they're supposed to have anyways. Even go back to, hitting the bunker shots. When I'm in the bunker, when I'm telling people to practice in the bunker or watching them play, you have to rotate, uphill lies, downhill lies, that type of stuff. You have to rotate the texture of the bunker, wet sand, soft sand, et cetera, because these things come into play, So the driving range can give you an inaccurate view of what's really reality as far as you're playing. You can be hitting the ball perfect on the driving range. How does that really translate to different courses? It's a different story. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So the idea again is to, what really weakens people is the grief and fear. And so we don't want grief and fear. Grief and fear can cause the body, a lot of stress. Anger is just a reaction to grief. We certainly don't want that. And if you're having anger on the course, you really can't even, it's hard to even play and react to that, So the idea is to learn to, identify it quickly. Maybe if you have a caddy, if you're a professional golfer or an amateur partner, you talk to your caddy, you joke it out. My book has a bunch of techniques, so we go chapter by chapter, and we discuss ways to release your emotions. So what the key would be, like say you're on a golf course, you can't do music, you can't. One of my best ways that I release emotions is sitting and doing Chinese massage, a full body massage. I can let out all my emotions just by the simple touch of having that happen. Or else, basically, what you can do on the course is talk to your caddy, joke around, maybe look at the sky, the water, the plants, you know what I mean? Just maybe take some deep breaths. There's different techniques you can use, but you have to get used to using those techniques, and they have to work for you. Key to those techniques is to see how your body's responding. So for example, if I have trouble, hitting out of the rough, and I have a lot of anxiety about that, well, the idea then is to go back to practice out of the rough, until I have less anxiety. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And anxiety
and the
would
key,
be fear.
you're exactly right. Right, you're exactly right. One of the things that we always talk about as professionals is, to practice with a purpose. And you're exactly right in your analogy earlier is that a lot of amateurs don't really have any sort of purpose in their practice. They're just sort of going here and there, or they're doing things that they're not likely going to be repetitive out in the golf course. One of the other things too that I think that really separates, and again we've talked about this many times in our show, is having a good pre-shot routine, which we see on television with a lot of the professionals, is they're very consistent. And that also, I think you would agree, helps keep their emotions in check. They get prepared for the shot, and doing the same routine with a consistency helps them sort of, for instance, if they've hit a bad shot and they're now stepping up, to hit their third shot, that routine, that pre-shot routine, allows them a time to sort of calm themselves back down, regroup, if you will, and refocus on the task at hand. This is something that, Bob, I think you would agree with, that a lot of amateurs don't do on a consistent, regular basis. So when they do have, as we all do, have some mishaps on the golf course, they're not allowing themselves to take time. So are there things that you would suggest that they do as they're coming up to the shot that would maybe help them create that good pre-shot routine and help them calm themselves back down?
Yeah, I would stay with that just for a second. The pre-shot routine is just absolutely essential in golf, and I'll tell you why. And I would say your vast majority of amateurs just don't do it, But you're anybody on the web.com professionals, but even your college players will mostly be doing this stuff. You have to get the blood flowing to the specific joints that need it. So I was on the Golf Channel today watching Cameron Champ hit the ball 340 yards on one drive. But what's happening before that? He takes this nice pre-shot routine, a couple of swings where he's getting the blood flow into his shoulders and hips. John Rahm was quoted as saying he uses his big muscles, his shoulders and his hips when he swings. The power of this golf swing is mostly in the shoulders and hips. You know what I mean? That's where the real turn is going in. And so you have to get blood flow into that. And so I think that
right.
For example, let's say with the drive, for example, you can't just walk up onto a golf course, they say the first hole, maybe the fifth hole, etc. Take the club out of your bag and, maybe take a half swing or, and then swing the ball. What you're doing there is you're shocking the central nervous system, the blood flow. When you have a nice pre-shot routine, it's basically muscle memory. Muscles going to the blood and water. What are the muscles made up of? Blood and water. You're getting that circulatory system moving in the correct manner, so there's a memory there, So that's really important to do. And by the way, it's not just a good drive. For example, if you look on tour, all these pros, they're only averaging 60% fairways. You know what I mean? What they do, what factors come into play? Narrow fairways. I was watching the game again, the pro tournament today. The fairway was 20 yards wide, I think, in one part that I saw. What they do, they spray the ball a little bit here, but they hit it so far. That's one thing that happens. But they have to deal with weather. Like it was pouring raining out today, okay, and they still had to play within it, And I saw Phil Mickelson, fly a bunker shot into the other bunker. He had 3 bunkers on one hole. But the idea is that generally speaking, when you do a pre-shot routine like you're talking about, you're getting blood flow into the specific joints. You're replicating. You're doing some good visualization too, which I like to do, and you're emptying your mind. All these things need to take place to hit a good shot. It's sort of like doing a ballet, a pirouette. You see the whole audience in front of you, and a young lady does a triple pirouette where she's circling around. It's so graceful. But really, that's what golfers do. I mean, a good golfer like Rory McIlroy will hit a drive 320 yards, but then you see him out of the bunker, and he has this great touch, to hit that nice bunker shot or a chip. And And their pre-shot routine is certainly part of it, but behind that goes years and years of practice that come into play. When we talk about pros, we're talking to the cream of the crop, and sure, it's good to talk about the 200 guys on tour, or including Web.com European Tour, but really for every golfer, the golf game it's a gift in my eyes to play golf for anybody. And you have your 80-year-old retiree out there in Florida. He's walking on the course tomorrow. It's a gift for him to play. What is he doing that's so pleasurable? He's getting oxygen in the joints. He's walking. I always joke with my clients, like, well, if you were a puppy dog, what kind of puppy dog would you be? I'd be a little beagle, but maybe you're a Doberman Pinscher. You got to keep moving in life. You don't want to have a sedentary life. People that sit in the office all day, they're getting stiff in their joints. Golf replicates a lot of what human beings need to do to survive and to stay strong, and that is, keep the blood flowing, keep moving, stay erect. These are all positive things. And I'm not biased towards golf in any way. If you like tennis, if you like bowling, I support everybody in each what they're doing. I think for me, it's my reason for being on this show is, say, for example, I'm in a golf show tonight, but if somebody told me to do a tennis show tomorrow, do a bowling show the next day, a cheerleading show the next day, an addiction show, I would do those because it's my obligation to help people because I have the knowledge of what really is the root cause of stress, and I can help people with this stuff. So anybody that is listening tonight to your show and in the future, and all they have to do is basically, my materials are basically free. They can go on my blog and look at them, or they can go on Amazon, and you can master this approach. Typically, though, Ted, it takes between 5 to 20 hours or more. I would say, on average, for my clients to really learn this, about 30 hours to learn. To master the approach, what it means. Because what you have to do, Ted, is you have to learn about what stress is, and what the environment, what in the environment is causing you stress, and then keep that in your long-term memory. This takes time. So what we're really doing over time is just being really supportive with people. See, some people might want to learn 2 parts of the 8 steps. Some might want to learn it 1 month, quit for 6 months, come back later. You have to be non-judgmental and accepting of people. What's the perfect example? I was thinking about something before I got on the show today. Like when my daughter when she was born, she was like 1.5 years old. When she started crawling and walking, she went backwards. You know what I mean? She didn't crawl forward; she would walk backwards. So I'd watch her get stuck underneath the couch backwards. I'd lift up the couch. You know what I mean? But I didn't yell at my kid. You know what I mean? You love your child, and you have to really treat people the same way, with love and compassion, because people are going to make mistakes. So the idea is that if they're ready to learn, they want to change, you're there for them. So when I'm on the range, if I see 20 people, I don't really say anything to anybody, and they come up to me, or people want to get to know me, they call me, etc., and then I'm willing to help them. Most people have to suffer, basically, fear and grief. Those are the 2 emotions that are debilitating for people. Anger is basically grief, too, but they can come because they have anger issues, too. But pain, psychic pain, is what's going to make people change, generally speaking. For example, if you have a great job, you're happy, you're not going to want to look at other jobs, probably. You're not going to want to look at relocating this or that. But if you hate your job, you might want to change. So that's a good analogy. Well, it's the same with the golf swing. If you're having trouble out of the bunker and you can't score because of that, well, then you might seek some help from a golf professional. If you're having trouble with your emotions, then you might seek help from a sports psychology person like myself. But these are all avenues that are out there more and more for people. The idea is to identify that you first have a problem. That's difficult for some people.
Right. And I think another thing, too, Bob, that a lot of golfers have is, obviously we talked about the pre-shot routine, which is important. But another thing that we see a lot of times, and there's really kind of 2 different scenarios here, but business folks, as an example, a lot of times they're bringing their work onto the golf course, and they want to come out, maybe play a quick 9 or something before work, and they've got an important sales meeting in the afternoon, so they're running through that presentation in their mind, and at the same time they're trying to play golf, and they wonder why they're not playing very well or not scoring very well, and that's because they've got too much baggage, if you will, that they're bringing to the golf course. And conversely, somebody else that's maybe out there and they're having some personal issues, maybe financial issues, or maybe marital issues or what have you, and they're bringing a lot of that anxiety and that stress out into the golf course. So those are some areas as well that affects all of us at some point in various different ways. What do you say to folks like that? How do they sort of decompress, if you will, before they get out there on the golf course? What would you suggest when they're heading to the range? Maybe they're going to warm up for a little bit before they actually get out in their round. What advice would you give them there?
Right. That's a great depiction of what happens to a lot of people. And I would first say, what does it take to be a good golfer? I think golfers are pretty much people like a landscaper or a plumber. They're earthy people, and they stay within themselves.
Right.
Shutting the shot. You often hear pro football players, coaches say one play at a time, one down at a time. You really have to have that mentality of staying in the here and now, which is what mindfulness is. Basically, it's in the here and now. What mindfulness really is, the idea that you stay calm, listen to your breathing. You can feel your breathing, okay? And it's a good way to reset. Now, what you're talking about, and what golfers really have to do as far as performing well, is stay within the moment for each shot. So I hit a drive. Mm-hmm. Sure, I hit that drive. I have to let that drive go, empty it completely, so it's in the rearview mirror, and reset for my next shot with maybe a short iron, okay? And once I hit that short iron, I have to let go of those emotions, the emotions that occur, to hit my next shot, which may be a chip or a putt. Now, going back to the scenario where somebody's overwhelmed, that's why what you really have to do to be an effective golfer is master the emotions on the course and off the course. My golf psychology book, by the way, each chapter covers scenarios on the golf course, but it also has one section in each chapter for off the golf course. And coincidentally, what happens is once you have a relaxed state of being, all you have to do is go to the chapter in my book that's causing you stress. So, for example, Chapter 2 is grief, okay? Chapter 3 is which is basically sadness or depression. Chapter 4 is anxiety, which is just fear or dread. And then you have a chapter on anger. We have a chapter on relationships, like exactly what you're talking about, stress with families, et cetera. So what you're looking at really, again, is that somebody that's that hasn't really learned ECT yet. ECT is about every situation you're doing, you're taking responsibility for on and off the course. So the idea is that emotions are you can't turn them on and off like you think. If you do, you'll forget about them. You forget how you're training your body to. So what is really emotional core therapy? It's a way to monitor your body for stress. So stress is what alters the golf swing. So we don't really want that. So the idea is you really have to own the process and learn to take care of yourself off the golf course. And go back. Let's say for a second, like some of these pros, they have young kids at home, maybe 2 to 5 years old. They play on the course for 8-10 hours. They have to go home, change diapers. The wife bosses around, do the dishes, et cetera, and they're overburdened. That's actually what you're talking about. Somebody's at work. He's got things going on in his mind. He's really not ready for golf. And I think, what can he do? In a good example, if music calms you down, that's fine. There's, my book talks about 20, 30 ways to relax. You might want to, stretch out, get the blood flowing. You really might want to redirect talk to somebody about a topic that's away from golf. The best way to do it is identify what stress you have that's off the course, talk about it, embrace it, and then try to put it past you, which is kind of difficult, And going back to this, again, golfers have, even your best golfers out there, your little older ones, maybe Freddie Couples, Vijay Singh, things like that. Well, people listening to this show, they might be 40, 50 years old. They may have injuries. Injuries are a good example of what can happen to a golfer. Your swing may not be where it's at because of a slight hip strain or a slight shoulder strain. I see this all the time. Golfers get upset because they have a month where they're just in a lot of pain. They're walking in pain, et cetera, and that affects them the same as anything else. The idea is to treat each stress you have, whether it's injury, whether it's the weather, whether it's a kid at home sick, and really isolate those variables, work to identify them as much as possible, and then address them before you get on the course. Again, what we're really talking about, what is it to be a good golfer? To stay in the moment, to embrace the trees, the beauty of we listen to most golfers, they appreciate being on the course. I golf with professionals, weekly over the past 5 or 7 years. And, what do they all have in common? They really love what they do and appreciate it. They love being out there, seeing the beauty of the golf courses, playing different golf courses, the challenge of it all, the beauty of it all, the clubhouse, et cetera. There's a lot of beauty out there that they're privileged to play. It really is a privilege to play, I think, in a lot of ways, golf, So you have to have that. You have to live in the moment. The more you can live in the moment is better for you. My book is really a process. To learn psychology is a process, to master it is a process. But say, for example, you're a great golfer, you've mastered emotional core therapy. That doesn't guarantee anything, Ted. All it means is that you can take ownership of the next shot. You see what I'm saying? So nobody guarantees. There's no guaranteeing life for any of us. We could go out the next day and twist our hip and be injured for 6 months or a year, and that's the reality of life on and off the course. I think the idea is to not take anything for granted, to stay in the moment as much as possible. And I think, what I've done over the years is I've really listened to my clients. I have a lot of Hindu clients, Indian clients, Islamic clients. And so psychology has only been around for maybe 120, 130 years, but religions have been around for, a couple thousand years. And what you've seen is,
right.
I have books that cover the 5 basic religions and how the religions have for years tried to calm the central nervous system down. They have different approaches they've used to try to relax. Prayer is another example. It's probably the most well-researched, besides mindfulness, a way to calm down. And, you listen to Kevin Streelman talks about how prayer helps them, et cetera. You have people that use prayer as a way to relax. It's another thing to do. But the idea is that when, what it is, Ted, when you can learn to relax and stay calm, you're going to make better decisions. So to start where this conversation came from a few minutes ago, the guy that was hurried off the course, what he's not going to be able to, when he's overwhelmed, he's not going to make as good decisions as someone that's calm. Do I need a 7-iron or 8-iron for this shot? What does it take for that? You have to stay in the moment, feel the wind. How can you tell where the wind's coming from? I feel it between both my ears. You could look at you could throw some grass up in the air. You could look at the trees. There's a lot of different ways. But if you don't know the wind on a golf course, that's a problem. You know what I mean? If you don't know the distance, that's another problem too. If you don't know the elevation of the greens, these are all factors that come into play. But it comes from staying in the moment. So what people see when the golfers on TV is they're making all these calculations. It's basically, I would describe it as like a jigsaw puzzle they're solving. They're very good at it, where somebody that doesn't know anything about golf would just be overwhelmed. These guys are meticulous about what they do. They have their books in their pocket about the greens, with the way they're lied, where they have the distance there. They have a caddy that helps them, that walks the course before, things like that. And so the rest of us are we all get a little overwhelmed from time to time when we get on a course. Every time I've ever played, I've been upset, hurt, sad. That's just the life. But it's like a merry-go-round ride that we want to go back on every time. You know what I mean? Like a little kid. It's fun. It's a discovery.
Right. And something else too, that's a great point. Something else too that I think a lot of golfers could really take a cue from, and you just talked about it, is what the pros do, Bob, when they're out there on the golf course before they even get up to their shot, is they're gathering information. They're looking, as you said, they're looking to see what the wind's doing, whether it be throwing some grass in the air or feeling it on their presence. They're looking for obstacles that are out in the golf course. Where's the bunkers? Where's out of bounds? So they're doing it in information gathering, and obviously they're reading their yardage books and so forth. But and obviously their caddy gives a tremendous input. But this is something that, again, going back to your earlier point in the beginning about that transition from range to golf course. If you're practicing the same shot every time on the practice tee, and you're not really changing things up somewhat, then when you get out there and you're faced with a different situation, it's just going to fall apart. And I think this is what happens as well. So,
that's a great point. I would like to say that for a second. That's really the key of golf, is really mastering the poor emotions. There's 4 emotions: joy, grief, fear, relief. The idea, and to take a step back, Ted, is really to embrace the grief and fear. Okay. So what happens is, the way you want to gather information. For example, nobody's won the U.S. Open on the driving range, or the British Open.
No.
They win it on the golf course. So how does Tiger? He's won a lot of majors, or Phil Mickelson, or Rory. Why have they done so well? They've been on the golf course gathering information for years and years, and what they've done is learn to know what brings them joy, what golf shots to hit. So the idea is that when they miss a shot, they own it, go back and figure it out. And I think that comes back to embracing all 4 emotions. For example, the truth of any champion, Ted, is this: to embrace the bad like the good. I always say to my clients, the worst thing is the best thing. Why? It's an opportunity to learn. So we're learning constantly from the 4 emotions: joy, grief, fear, relief. There's only 4. So let's go back to this so we see this, Ted. I give 2 examples in my book. There's a teacher on a school ground. She has to watch 4 kids. And there's another teacher on the next school ground about a couple miles away. She has to watch 150 kids. So who has the easier job? The one for 4, right? obviously.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? See, the other one's 150.
Sure.
Her brain is scrambled. She's running around for chasing after this kid. She doesn't know where she's at. So it's much easier to watch 4 kids versus 150. Well, that's how the emotions are. Another example would be, say you're a miner and you had to go on the beach to find precious metals, and one miner has to only find 4 metals, and the other one has to find 150. Who has the easier job? The one for 4. So when you can learn that there's only 4 emotions and learn how your body responds to them, that's the key. What really happens, I hate to say this, is people don't. They have these debilitating emotions and they go back off the course. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, for golfers, I see a lot of drinking out there, substance abuse, smoking, cigarettes. I would say half the golfers I see out there are drowning themselves in these emotions and they don't work. And sometimes they may come to me afterwards and say, yeah, I tried this for years, it doesn't work. I've tried this medication. So what happens is medications change your perception, not your reality. So if I'm in the bunker again, that's good about the bunker. Let's say I'm trying to chip the ball and I'm not good at chipping. So if I take medications for that, or I drink some, 2 6-ounce or 8-ounce glasses of beer, that's just going to numb my 4 emotions: the joy, grief, fear, relief. It's not going to change my reality. I still have to hit that shot. So golfers, again, are really a breed of, humans that like to persevere. And so the idea is to embrace those 4 emotions. So what happens, let's go back to, a golfer that really wants to win and be well. He wants to be the champion of the seniors down there in Florida. What is he doing differently that other people are not doing? On the course, he's taking information about what he's missing, and he's going back and fixing it. The way to fix it is on the range. Say you have, again, all your shots except you don't have your driver is spraying a little bit. It's costing you 2 shots around. Well, the idea then is to go back to that range, in time and to work on it slowly and build that driver up to where you can stand the test of time. But what do champions do? They have to embrace the bad and learn from it, because then they make the bad the good. You see? So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a practical example that I used a couple of years ago. I was basically walking down the hallway and I wasn't thinking. I had actually one morning I tried taking this melatonin to go to sleep. The first time I ever took it, I was a little drowsy. Just walked and I tripped over this carpet that was kind of fluffed up. I fell down 20 stairs and I cracked my rib and I knocked out my tooth.
Wow.
And the pain was so bad I couldn't laugh or cry. When I laughed or coughed, I felt like I had to go to the hospital. So it was in pain for a couple of months. But I had to embrace that. Even when I was getting my tooth fixed and it hurt like heck, I had to try a couple implants that didn't take, and I ended up doing the bridge. I had to embrace that. You know why? That was how I learned. So from now, I'm 57 years old. I have bifocals, so I have to grab the railing every time I walk down the stairs. I don't ever want that pain again. And I certainly don't want to go to the dentist and have implants again, so I brush my teeth, et cetera. So you have to, when you get older, you realize you have to learn this stuff. You know what's funny? I love talking to older people, 60, 70, 80. Most of them know these 4 emotions. They like, I know that. Yeah, I got that. I can tell you. I go, what are the 4 true emotions? They go, this, and I go, you're pretty damn close, I think we have a duty, though, as adults to help young people with this, because they do kind of give up on themselves earlier. That pain gets them so bad, they try other things in life. That's what, that's my passion, is to help people live a full life. If golf is a tool they want to use to comfort themselves and have as a way to relax, that's all fine, and that's more power to them. And that's what basically we do as human beings. Some people might like gardening. Some people might like going shopping. Whatever people need to calm themselves down and have a good day, well, we have to support that process.
Right. Just a quick point I want to make about when you're talking about juniors and that, one of the other things that, it's hard enough that they're learning to control their emotions, but now they've got to carry their parents' emotions out in the golf course as well. You get some of these junior golfers and their parents, it's like on the sidelines of the soccer field, and they're not cheering them on, but they're actually almost trying to control them while they're out in the golf course, and that creates a lot of anxiety. So that's a big issue right now in the golf industry, and has been for years, that they're trying to overcome as an instructor, and that is to really, you want the parents to be involved, but at the same time, you want them to understand that there's a process that their kid needs to go through in order to become a better golfer, and you on the sideline is not going to help. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I want to ask you a question real quick here.
I'll stay with that for a second. Good point, because what happens is a good coach is very supportive of people. Like my daughter is 22 years old now. She went through all that as a cheerleader. And I wish I could rescue her and say, listen, don't do these bad things. all our children, even, whether or not our children are going to make their mistakes. All we can do as parents, and the best way to do it, I never raised my voice in my daughter in 22 years. I was always supportive of her. I'd give her my book when she was younger, when she had difficulties, and what we do is basically say, what's that relationship you're choosing doing for you? Is it going to bring you joy, grief, or relief? Learn to monitor your body. And again, going back to my daughter, when she was homesick from college, she was stressed out. Somebody had stolen her computer, and she was a computer major. She had all this stress, and she turned out to be a great kid, made honors, etc. And golfers, what I was always do is supportive of her or the process. And I would say, most people go through the same things you're going through. The idea of, if parents are overwhelming their kids, hopefully, and I've seen this before too, have the kids talk to someone about what's really going on. Say, I know you're trying to support them, but ultimately, each person is a separate vessel. You know what I mean? And the more you can teach them to do that themselves, to overcome and learn themselves, well, that's a key thing. I have 3 books for teens, Ted. I have a book for regular students. All my books are some for agnostic people, atheists. Then I cover different religions. I have books for Christians, but I also have books for Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. So, because I would say in the United States, 70% of people are spiritual in one form or another, at least, maybe 75.
Sure.
60% are identified as Christians. So I use that as their basis. But if they're not religion, we certainly support that. But the idea then is, and it's a great point, to teach people when they're younger. I do my teen books. I've gone out to schools for years, and I've been able to teach the kids themselves. So what I do, I have 150, 175 kids in a room, and we can give them each a chapter of the book, and they can teach themselves. I would give them the microphone. They talk about the emotions. That empowers them. The idea is to, I would love to have all kids throughout the United States, and throughout the world learn these emotions and how to handle them when they're younger, because invariably we all suffer stress, and it weakens us tremendously. So the more we can identify and release it is key. The key word I use, Ted, is catharsis, cleansing of the soul. So you have these emotions, joy, grief, fear, relief, and grief and fear can be debilitating, so can anger. Just like you're brushing your teeth, learn to release them and identify them. So going back to the parent, if the parent's causing you undue stress, the young golfer hopefully has a vehicle there where he can talk to someone about that and basically then articulate to his parents, I know you mean well, but this is kind of what I need to do myself. So again, we're not looking at something that can happen in a day. Usually, I work with young people, maybe junior high, high school, et cetera, occasionally, but you're probably looking at, again, 5 to 10 to 15 hours with a therapist working on this process, and it takes time to learn it. You have to, if you're going to learn about psychology, you have to give yourself time to learn it, to identify it, and use it on your own body first, and then go and then you can teach the world about it. So here I am now with you the second time on the show. Hopefully you can help other people with this. It takes a little time, So you you learn most of the aspects of it. You can go back and piecemeal give it to them, and they can get better.
Right. Let me ask you a question here as we get close to the end of our time. For those of us that are fortunate down here in Florida and other parts of the country that are a little bit south, if you will, and can play pretty much all year round, those that are up north like yourself and northeast and northwest, where they're not able to get out on the golf course quite yet, what would you say to them? What can they do now? I mean, everybody's, they might go to an indoor facility to work on the physical part of their game, but is there something that they can be doing now before golf season starts to really kick off for them that they can be doing to get themselves emotionally prepared to start the season?
You make a couple great points. I've talked to a bunch of the top pros around here. They don't like hitting off the mats, a lot of them. It doesn't replicate some of the things you have to do, like take a divot after the ball, et cetera. It can hurt your swing to be on the mats a lot. You can jar your elbows and shoulders. So you'd be surprised how a lot of people don't like to hit. Like indoors, there's a lot of driving ranges, but it can actually hurt your swing. Everybody's different about what they can and can't do. I just got out of the gym today after 2 hours. A lot of people, I know, pros or whatever, they're working on their physical aspects right now. Surprisingly, just out here in the Midwest, we play golf in 40 degrees, 50 degrees. I actually prefer playing golf in 60 and 50 degrees versus 90 because the humidity out here, it's so hot. Yeah. It's just, it's hard to swing. But what you can do is this is a good time to learn, especially take care of your body, get in good shape. And that's where personal trainers are important that especially can replicate the golf swing. There's different pulls and things that you can use that are helpful for golfers. Why weightlift and do bench presses and squats if it doesn't help your golf game? Do you see what I'm saying? Talk to a golf pro, maybe a physical therapy guy that
certified
can help
golf
you
fitness.
Yeah, exactly. That can help you with the golf swing that gets replicated on the course for golfers. Okay. You can also, I think it's a great time to learn the mental game and apply the mental game. It's fantastic. That's where, if you really want to challenge yourself, that's a good thing to do, is learn about emotions, how to deal with them, identify them, and that's another thing you can do too. I think also diet is important. If you're gonna play golf, in tournament 2 or 3 days, you have to be able to stay in shape. So there's different things you need to do cardio wise, stretching, things like that. These are all tools you can do. I would say even talking to pros. If you want to be a good golfer, one of the best things you do is take lessons from a guy that can shoot scratch golf. That knows, that's been there, that he's gotten that level or below par. Has played on tour, things like that. What has he done? What has he done or she done that's got them successful? Listen to them, and then that talk. Hopefully you can be open. I have a phrase here: as sick as your secrets. You need to be able to tell the people that are mentoring you everything that's going on with you. You can't hold anything back, and that's the whole trick. The more you can be open about your emotions, about what's really bothering you, well, then you're going to have data to learn from. You see what I'm saying? And when people walk in my door, I say, this is a non-judgmental zone. You tell me whatever's on your mind, because then we can learn from it. You know what I mean? And so we go from there. And I practice this myself because I'm just a struggling human being. We're all walking wounded, so to speak, especially golfers. I don't know any golfer that's not very humble, that doesn't know that they can have a bad day. I play with, again, some of the top pros in Illinois, local pros, and I can see them shoot 82 some days or 2 under par.
Right.
So they have to really accept themselves, you know what I mean? And sure, they're upset about it, but they certainly have to regroup in time for the next day, and certainly let that go, so it doesn't affect their family life, doesn't affect their customers and things like that. Well, how does that occur? I think it all comes back from not getting too up or down, to have a belief in yourself, have some goals outside of golf that give you support, have a good family support system, have a good working environment, things that a support system is essential. You see what I'm saying? So have people that support you and who you are, and support them in turn.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And, I think that as we get ready to, start a new season for a lot of folks, I think you're exactly right. Now is the time to be working on some of those things. And, a lot of times you can reflect to the previous season and kind of, if you've been kind of keeping your own stats from the previous season, you kind of look through and evaluate how you did last year, not just with the shots that you hit, but just how you handled yourself. And when you had a bad round, go through that and think about how you handled your emotions through that round. And, some of the pros now have, I've heard them talk about, and I've read articles where, they will actually do things out on the golf course. And I was talking about this on Tuesday, but the player escapes my mind, but there was an article that was done, and he talked about where the 2-second rule, and what he does is when he does something that he feels that anger, he's got 2 seconds to sort of eject that emotion, and then he moves on. So instead of, belaboring that point or that feeling, he sort of ejects it from his body in 2 seconds. He gets angry, upset with that shot, but then he moves on and he regroups and goes through the process again. So I think there's things that we can do. And that may not work for everybody, but obviously that's something that particular player has found has been successful in handling his emotions out on the golf course. So, Bob, I want to give you I've really enjoyed the conversation tonight, and we've got to wrap up, unfortunately, but I want to give you an opportunity just to let the folks know again where they can go to get more information if they want to reach out to you, and where they can read more information online, and also where they can get any of your books.
Sure. And again, I want to thank you so much for having this opportunity to talk with you and your audience about emotions. Basically, you can get any of my information on my website. EmotionalCoreTherapy.com is a good place to go. I have a blog on there. You can just Google Robin Moylan blog. It has my books. It has my links to Amazon. It has Amazon.com has my 7 books listed there, and a lot of my links too. My published journal articles are out there also on my blog and on Amazon. So there's videos out there too on YouTube. Just to Google Emotional Core Therapy. If you Google that, it'll come up right away. And going back to one last thing, there's no such thing as a bad question. Basically, whatever any golfer is going through, you have to have there's an answer for it if it's temporary in nature, and it goes back to my 8-step flow chart. Once you can master the 8-step flow chart of identifying and releasing stress, because there's a cause and effect relationship with stress, Ted. So any stressful event,
right,
there's an A and a B, a beginning and an end. Well, my approach is the only one in the world that actually does that and lets you learn to release it. So once you give yourself the time to master emotions, it's going to help you on and off the golf course. That's really what we want. And it goes back to what I said before. It's a privilege to be on your show. It's a privilege to serve yourself. And it all goes back to service. I serve the needs of you and your community. You serve the same needs. And we have a duty to bring the best techniques out there. Emotional core therapy is just a pen name for proper psychology techniques. It's what I've done over the years is go to Barnes and Nobles and all these bookstores and all these journals and come up with good techniques to identify stress and put them all together in an organized fashion that's simple so people can read it, not some psychobabble that they can't understand.
Right, and that's definitely important in this day and time to be able to have it as simple as possible. Well, Bob, I want to thank you very much for joining me again on Golf Talk Live. Again, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you tonight, and hopefully the audience will pick up some good information, and hopefully they will go and visit your website and order some of your books as well. At the very least, go and get some information. There's a lot of good stuff there. So thank you, Bob, for coming on, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much, Ted, and you have a great day. Good luck.
All right, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that was my very special guest, Robert Moylan, again, licensed clinician, professional counselor, and author of several books, including Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. And as he mentioned, if you go to emotionalcoretherapy.com, you can get all the information, all the links there, or you can go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com, and all of his books, of course, are listed there. Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for tuning in faithfully each and every week. And remember that on March 7th, we'll be bringing back the Coach's Corner panel segment. So you want to make sure you come back for that. And in the meantime, over the next couple of weeks or so, until that time comes, I'll just do my what I call Golf Talk Live Light with just an hour broadcast with my very special guest. So again, thanks everybody. Happy Valentine's Day for all of you folks out there. I hope you had a good day today and able to spend some special time with that loved one of yours. And I will see you next week here on Golf Talk Live. Thanks for listening to this evening's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. Remember to tune in each week at blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. If you can't join us live, check out the on-demand section for previously aired broadcasts, or listen on any of the following social media platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, TalkStream Live, and of course, Spotify. To get updates on future shows and upcoming guests, be sure to visit the show's Facebook page, Golf Talk Live Blog. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. Remember to join me live each week for another great broadcast of Golf Talk Live. See you next time. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.